Welcome, 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 everybody. Gosh, I feel so fortunate to have the opportunity for you to spend the next few moments with us to learn about something that's, I think, important to all of us. First of all, that's why you're here. And then, for me, when I think about my career in contact centers, helping, those, to actually get greater performance and be successful in our contact center has been one of my greatest joys. So welcome to the webinar, How to Supercharge Contact Center Agent Performance on, on site and at home. And for some of you, you may have both on site and at home. For some of you, you may have just on site and are looking to do some at home. And there's more and more contact centers out there that really just have a strictly at home model. Some have gone through and sent a few agents home, then they've sent all their agents home eventually, and then they have actually sent supervisors home. So there's a lot of diversity that we find in our contact center. And I'm going to go through some introductions here in a moment and go through some housekeeping, but I wanted to give you an opportunity to see our faces up close before we go down to this little window and we go through the presentation. So my name is Jim Rembauch, and with me, I'm fortunate enough to have Melissa Pollock, and I'll give you a little bit more detail about us, but I wanted to open up a few important notes. First of all, if you can ask questions anytime throughout our webinar, and we're going to continue the questioning and discussion and all of that in our private Facebook community, and I'll give you all of that information here in a little bit. I also put a message that's supposed to be available for you to see that. And also, tell us where you're calling in from. Right now we have, people that are still coming in to the webinar like crazy, which is awesome. And so just please let us know. So we have some folks from Canada. Hello, Lynn. We have Adriana from Miami, Francine from Montreal. So we have people from all over. Now, we've had people registered from North America, South America, and I even saw a few people coming in from Asia and Europe. So this is pretty exciting. Now, this webinar, of course, will also be available via replay. For those that are here during the live event, you're going to get a notification of the recorded event here probably about 2 hours after we conclude. And then also, the registration page is going to flip to where this webinar could be accessed on demand. So you can, after you enjoy the time that you have here and gather all this learning, you can actually share it with your colleagues so they can register for the webinar as well. Okay, so let me go ahead and start our slide. We'll get into slides and we'll get into some housekeeping, and then we'll get going. So we'll give a chance for Melissa to share some of her deep experience and knowledge with us. Okay? All right, so my name, again, is Jim Rembauch, and I'm the host of this particular webinar and the president of Call Center Coach. I've been in the contact center industry for a couple decades, and all these little emblem thingies are basically just saying that I talk a lot, right? and I write a lot, and I have opinions. I'm a passionate person, and I really love what I do, and I'm glad that you're here. And so I've gotten recognized by people, in the community for being, that person who loves to share and connect. And I've also, for me, have experience on the front line, managing on the front line, coaching and developing performance on the front line. So this particular topic is, really brings me back home. And I've come full circle with, developing the virtual leadership and development academy for emerging and frontline supervisors and contact centers. So this is exactly what we help to do, is use some of the tools, use some of the tactics, use some of the, higher performing practices in order to help everybody be more successful, including, your entire organization and you on this webinar. So one of the things that's also really important is that you're going to get a bunch of tools for participating in this webinar. Unlike any other webinars that you might participate in the call center industry, you're not going to get tools like you're going to get on this one. And you're going to get several. And Melissa's going to explain many of those, and you're going to have a chance to download those at the end of the webinar. So you have to stay in order to be able to get those, okay? A few housekeeping notes, like I'd mentioned, we are going to continue any type of Q&A after the webinar in our Facebook group, and this can go ongoing. So in other words, if you have a question 2 weeks from now about the things that we cover, you can go to that Facebook community and you can ask that question, and we'll be there to help you. Also, the downloads that you're going to get from this webinar will also be available within that files section of the Facebook community. If you have any problems at all, you can text me on my mobile. I've got it right here with me. hopefully you won't have any issues. And we're going to get into some other housekeeping things associated with the webinar platform that we're using, which is called Webinar Jam. And the best browser to use for participating in webinars on Webinar Jam is Chrome. If you have any issues with audio or video, there should be a reconnect button. If you click on that, hopefully it'll clear your problem. Sometimes you have to close out and come back in. So if you have any additional problems than that, just know that the replay will be available, and we're always going to be able to field your questions. So you won't miss out, okay? So if you have any Q&A, use the appropriate window. Many of you have already been doing that. You can submit questions at any time, and you can even on the replay, when we have the replay event, those questions could be sent via email, and that's going to be something available when you watch the replay. Most importantly, get rid of all your distractions. We live in a highly distractive world, and being distracted affects your ability to become better because you miss out on important things that you should be able to, learn from. Okay, so take good notes. And again, you may have some questions that come in later, and taking those notes could help. So Melissa Pollock is someone who I've known, quite frankly, not long enough, because the time that I have known her, which has been within the past year, has been a joy to me because I get the opportunity to chat with somebody who has some similar passions and deep experiences within this contact center industry. And I think her title of Customer Success Officer, really doesn't tell all the things that she does. And so I'm actually going to give a little bit of an opportunity for you to learn more about her as a person and her journey within this contact center industry. So Melissa, please share that with us.
Thank you so much, Jim. I appreciate that. And welcome, everyone. We are absolutely thrilled that you're here. More important than who I am now, though, is who I was in the beginning. And in the beginning, I started on telephone, probably just like many of you, and in particular, an account management sales job. And it was my first corporate job, so I had no skills. In fact, I always love telling this story, but it is 150% true. I hung up on my first phone call in that first corporate job, and even worse, it was a voicemail. So I eventually promoted from within, of course. I began managing sales, and now it was my first time sales manager job. And with that, my first time coaching job. So you're not going to believe it, but I promise it's true. The very first thing that I needed to coach as a first-time manager and a first-time coach was hygiene, which is, I'm sure all of you just groaned or face-palmed because that is consistently known to be the most difficult thing to try and coach, something so very personal as that. Thankfully, I worked for a packaged training product video company, though, on soft skills, and I was able to prep using a video called The Practical Coach, and it saved my life. So since then, though, I've had the opportunity to expand into training, into sales leadership, operations, training and quality, business intelligence and Sigma work, learning and development, talent development, chief coaching officer, and of course, now today, great. But the bottom line about all of that is I had extraordinary opportunities to learn and to help people become better human handlers, as I like to call it. So I love doing that work. I don't think there's any more gratifying work. And I believe that leaders want to do better. Typically, we're not providing enough encouragement and guidance and structure for them to actually do so. So I want to share some insights today on the persistent challenges that as a call center worker and consultant that I experienced across many, many clients, and then talk about some of the solutions to those things so that you can supercharge performance. The whole point is, at the end of this webinar, you have some insight and some tools, the things that you need to actually supercharge frontline agent performance. So this is a little funny thing, Jim, I didn't even know if you knew this was in here, but this is so important that we talk about insights and solutions because of the mission that we all share. So a quote from one of my new favorite people is the future of our success to elevate performance quickly and sustainably. It's the challenge for all of us, and it's something that we have to achieve no matter who and where our agents are. There are a lot of challenges to doing that, though. And there's 4 things that I consistently found while working in consulting and contact centers over the span of more of a decade, and in trying to help them grow and be better. These problems were pervasive across engagement, productivity, training, coaching. And so the 4 things in particular were: agents in most cases couldn't see their own performance. They were dependent on supervisors to tell them how they were doing. Second, it's really difficult to build skills when training is formal. It's long, it's classroom, and it's generic to the role. We're going to talk more about all of these. But the third one was around supervisors having an inconsistent or even no process for coaching and performance management. And even if there was a process or a model, typically very little training on how to actually do it and do it well. And the 4th thing that I struggled with many clients over more than a decade was: how do you quantify who's coaching and what they're coaching on and whether any of it is effective? So those are very pervasive challenges, and we experienced a lot of pervasive consequences as well as a result of it. If agents can't see their performance, we have a lot of unpredictability and inconsistency in performance. If training isn't effective at building skills ongoing, obviously then we're putting a lot into training that's not giving us a return. And the costs of inconsistency in terms of a model and methods and procedures spans to efficiency, organization, follow through, and obviously into morale and burnout as well. So what did I learn about those things? I learned a lot about people and performance and process improvement by working with many clients in many locations, as I said, over a decade or more. So my hope today is to share some of those things with you so that you can either avoid or remedy these issues in your contact centers, and ultimately figure out ways that we can indeed supercharge agent performance around those challenges. So from that perspective today, we're going to talk about how you can empower agents to take independent action on their performance, and how you can build value and build skills with training, how we can give supervisors a structure that improves the consistency and the results of their developmental efforts, and ultimately, too, very much tied to that, that we can deliver a better, more effective coaching session and just overall employee development outcomes. So again, the intent from my perspective today is to give you insights and tools that help you drive these 4 things. So let's look at them one at a time. First, around empowering independent action. Agents can supercharge their own performance when they can see it. And again, this goes back to the challenge. In most cases, they can't see it. But if you think about it, none of us can identify what needs work and how to pivot from that if we can't see it and don't know what it is. That being said, there's probably more expectations now for access and visibility into performance than there ever has been. And I say that because of a few particular user groups. Indulge me a moment. I'm going to tell you that visibility into one's performance is no longer a nice to have. It is an expectation. And I've written about high potentials and top performers and work at home employees and millennials. And in the majority of the minds of those and others, having visibility into your performance is not an option. It is a requirement. Particularly with hypos, they expect us to be leaders, to run the business, to give them what they need to succeed and to take care of poor performance. Work at home, they typically have a higher work-life maturity to begin with. They've got a greater skill set as a result. They're typically more self-motivated, and they want to be able to independently problem solve. And then don't roll your eyes. I'm not bashing millennials by any means. In fact, I don't believe millennials expect anything more than really any of the rest of these groups or other groups. But what I do believe is that millennials tolerate less. So they're going to leave more quickly if we can't give them the tools to do their jobs. So why is it essential, though, to visualize performance as opposed to just provide reports? And from that perspective, there are a lot of studies that support this. The bottom line is there's a thing called the picture superiority effect that was first noted back in the 70s. It's been studied and written about many times since from MIT and other organizations. And the bottom line is that when we're able to see something visually, it translates into comprehension a lot more quickly than the written word does, and we retain it longer. So if you want to empower independent action, agents to be able to take action on their own performance, they have to have direct access to seeing their performance, and timely too, because here's the thing, think about all the reports that we typically provide about performance, different reports at different times, right? Well, those reports oftentimes are reporting on performance that's already in the past. Therefore, the opportunity to affect it has already gone by. So that's another challenge that we experience with this. But if we can give access and it's timely and it's visualized, then the benefit to you in creating that scenario for them is that they will help drive their own performance. Given the tools, people enjoy taking initiative and working to improve. They do it because they feel like they have transparency into what the company is measuring and how they're measuring it and how they personally are doing. And they can see what actually needs work. And when we can see our own performance and know what needs work, it initiates that sort of natural competitiveness to take action and inspires that desire and drive. So that's the piece that I want to share about independent action. But if you have questions, go ahead and put them into the chat window, share them. We'll answer as many as we can later. I understand from Jim, there's also the opportunity to answer additional questions in the Facebook community at the end. You'll hear more about that. For the moment, though, we're going to go ahead.
We'll get to the questions that we can. However, every question will be answered in somehow.
Super. Thank you, Jim. So the second learning that I'll share with you is agents perform better when they have access to training that is three things: easy to get to, easy to take, and easy to apply or to use. And so we know this because in CEB's Digital Learner Survey just 2 years ago, I loved this. I mean, it's unfortunate, but I loved it. They reported that more than half of employees said that learning was not easy, that training content was hard to get to, that it took forever to take, and then it was hard to actually apply it in real life scenarios. So why wasn't it easy? And that's an interesting question too. And I'm going to talk about the two main reasons that I learned working with many clients why it wasn't easy. As I do that, a little bit of humor for you. Since we're talking about bite-sized, personalized training, there's some virtual bite-sized snacks there for you. So why wasn't it easy? Well, two things. What I discovered over and over and over again in most every contact center is that the training is very formal. And what I mean by that is it's structured, it's scheduled, it's planned, it's away from the work desk and the work environment. It's typically long. It's a 2 to 4 hour classroom. It's a 60 to 90 minute e-learning. And so much is covered in that amount of time that people come away from it and they might retain recency and latency, right? The first and last things covered. But as soon as they leave the classroom or end the e-learning, there's a thing called the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve that kicks in, and it just starts to erode retention right away. So it's not only impossible on the beginning to really learn in terms of how to assimilate and use all that's covered in that kind of formal content, it also starts to erode immediately.
Yeah, and before
Yeah.
you go on with that, Melissa, I think it's really important to give a shout out to Robert Coleshaw, who put together a lot of the graphics for this webinar, because he did a fantastic job talking about that visual communication piece. Good job, Robert.
Absolutely. So the second reason it's not easy to get training to people that they can use is because by old learning and design methodologies, we created training that was for a role. So it was generic for if you were a CSR or you were a salesperson or you were a help desk associate. That's fantastic on the front end where you're trying to get an overview of the whole role and what are the skill requirements. But from an ongoing perspective, we're spending more time on training than ever before, and yet we're still struggling with the same performance issues because it's not specific to what the individual learner needs. It's generic to the should be requirements of the role. So again, those two things have us training over and over and over again, spending a lot of money on training dollars, and yet not necessarily realizing the ROI on training in terms of delivering valuable impact to both the agent and our customers, right? So how did we remedy this? And there are 3 steps that I'm going to share with you for how you can supercharge, right, bite-sized, personalized training and make training give more value to you and your organization. The first is around personalizing content. All I mean by that is giving people what they each individually need. Again, you might do overview training for everyone in the beginning. That makes sense for their role. But ongoing, you know what they're struggling with. And so giving them content that it specifically matches what they're struggling with exponentially adds value to them to boost skill and to your customer to get something valuable. So if you think about it like this, some people might need work on hold procedures. Others might need it on empathy. Someone else might be struggling with confidence. So if they were put into an entire multi-hour class that covered 12 different things, how much value would they really take? How much would they come out of that really doing something differently? So if you personalize, you can make it more efficient, more effective, and more valuable. The second thing is around integrating more informal learning. So I talked about formal as being very structured and planned and typically lengthy and out of the work environment. Well, informal and social learning has been growing over the last decade in K through 12, in college, and in corporate America. And it's think about how you can leverage collaborative learning, peer learning. Social learning is learning that happens in the work environment. It might be practice, it might be OJT, it might be being mentored by someone. It might be because you arrange the physical seating differently so that different people can benefit from tenured people or people who have particular skill. We also say encourage work groups that inspire collaboration and leverage chat and social tools that allow for that cross collaboration. I've even seen a client who uses it particularly to receive agent questions and push back answers on the spot. So there's all types of learning that it can occur outside of the classroom that can actually have a much higher impact in agent development than the formal classroom training. The third piece of that, though, that's really essential if you're going to try and integrate that more informal approach and social approach is you also then have to design content differently. So instead of multi-hour curriculums or e-learnings, think about call snippets, role plays, huddle activities, skill drills, short videos that teach little pieces, visually rich job aids. And I offer you this, think about how we consume content as consumers. right? We want to learn a thing. We go out to the internet, we make a couple of clicks, we watch a video, we read a document. And so our tendency, our culture now as a consumer as it relates to learning, that has to come in and evolve as well in terms of organizational learning. So
You're exactly right, Melissa. I mean, that's exactly what we did with creating the blended learning environment at the Call Center Coach Academy, is because that's when you start looking at how people learn best, how they do it. It's blended. It's
right.
multifaceted. It is
Right.
micro learning. It is, communities of practice. I mean, that's exactly, what is really what we have to do today in order to be more effective. So I love that you covered that.
Right, because we need community and collaboration. It's now how we live and how we prefer to work typically as well. But always the blend is the best, right? So again, if you have questions on bite-sized training, share them. We'll get to them later, but we're going to move to the third item. So the third learning that I got in all the contact center work was needing a system, right? And when I say system, I mean a collection of processes, methods, tools, something that's been standardized throughout the organization for how to do a particular thing. And in this case, what I learned is in many, many, many cases, supervisors, are able to supercharge agent performance when they have a standardized system for performance management, coaching, and development conversations. Those were absent in most cases. And here are the interesting things. It takes data to make choices around who to work with and on what. And we usually have that data, but first they have to dig through the data, interpret the data, make a decision around the data, and then to actually change behavior, they have to be able to have conversations about behavior. And this is where a lot of the tools that I'm sharing today as bonus tools are going to be of a significant value to you, because there's some pieces on what are behaviors, what are the different, there's 4 types that you look for, and you can't possibly coach unless you're aware of those 4 types of behavior and you observe for it. There's also a coaching model I'll share, very simple 6 steps, and an actual conversational tip sheet, the A to Z of how do you sit down and have a conversation, whether you're talking about a strength or an opportunity. There's some other things too. I don't want to take too much time on those, but just know that there's some very tangible things that I've used all over the place for many years with very successful results, and I'm happy to share them. So without a system, we in the absence of it, we improvise. And what I mean by that is our supervisors make different decisions on who and what to work with and who and what to coach based on a number of things. Usually they're junior coaches. They don't have a tremendous amount of experience in how to develop human beings. They might coach just based on how they received it. There's a lot of one-call coaching, or coaching on way too many items, or coaching on metrics and not behaviors. They also make decisions around what to do because operations, often we jump in and we say, hey, this is important this week. I need you to focus on this. And the big thing now with all the data that we have is we pummel in so many reports, usually through email and various systems. So a supervisor gets a report today, looks at it and says, oh, I'm going to go coach with John, goes and coaches with John today, but then tomorrow gets another report on a different metric and says, oh, I need to go coach with John on this. And so we end up having a lot of variable decision making around what to do with whom when there's not a standardized system. And there's also a lot of individual comfort and skill in coaching and talking with people about their performance that also is another variable in what they do. But we know that this results in inconsistency, inconsistent coaching, ineffective coaching, morale impacts. And we know that lack of structure and skill has unfortunate consequences. And I hope you'll love this image. It has a lot of unfortunate consequences because of a study from DDI that told us that the number one reason that frontline leaders fail is because of interpersonal skills. So And then even worse, the reasons that people leave then are because of their supervisor and specifically because of the interpersonal skills. So that's the art of communication, conversation, and coaching. And this continues to be our number one challenge. So what do we do about it? How do we remedy that? And I would tell you, you can supercharge performance. You can increase morale and engagement. You can improve relationships and retention. You can elevate performance and customer experience by providing a standardized system, processes, methods, tools. That's what creates consistency and drives results. However, it has to be communicated in terms of the mission and the priorities. Here's what I mean by that. A lot of metrics that we measure performance with, of course. However, in my experience, there's always one or two that are key because they're tied to the reason that you're doing business. In other words, maybe you measure NPS because it ties to the vision and the mission of how you want to serve customers. So what are those core things that shouldn't change even if we have some special emphasis on different metrics and different things throughout the weeks? Once we've said here's what's the most important thing and we've communicated that to our teams, then it's about, okay, providing a coaching model and a method. So we say here it's NPS and it's quality. These are our two biggest concerns from a metric perspective. Here's a coaching model. Here's the method and the training for how to have discussions around behavior on those metrics. Oh yes, and then you have to actually communicate. You expect that coaching to happen with those priorities using the model and the methods, and then you have to inspect that it's actually happening. And the tools there for number 2 and number 3, I have tools for you to give you a 6-step model, give you a tip sheet on how to discuss behaviors, and those things I think will be really helpful. Again, if you've got questions, send them in the chat and we'll get to them in a bit. But that's it, is implement a system, communicate it, practice it, train it, inspect it. The fourth one, my biggest learning and my favorite area was coaching effectiveness. We have to evaluate coaching effectiveness. So listen, you implemented a system, you trained it, now you have to evaluate the effectiveness of both the system from a process perspective, but more importantly, the people that are operating within that system. So,
hey, Melissa, I think that reminds me
yeah.
of one of the things that I, especially, it goes beyond contact centers, but that I always like to talk about is that it's unfair, it is unrealistic, and it's downright almost ridiculous to expect somebody to coach when they're not coached themselves. It's just not possible.
Absolutely, Jim, and you're going to see that stated here in a short bit too, because I'm with you on that. So many of my clients assumed that coaching was happening and that coaching was effective because everybody's supervisors are promoted from within, meaning they were top performers. And there's an inherent assumption that if you were a top performer as an independent contributor, then you should be a top performer in terms of coaching and bringing others up to where you were. However, that is still a very challenging thing. So I was doing a coaching observation with a team manager. It was Monday morning, so it was just after the weekend. And he was trying to connect with the agent a little bit first before getting into the business of coaching. And so he asked him, "How was your weekend?" And the agent responded and said, "Not too good. My dog died." Now, he did it very flatly, so he didn't cause a lot of cue in the vocal variants, but nevertheless, unfortunately, I'm sitting there observing and the supervisor missed it and my heart broke. But instead he said, "Okay, great. Well, the reason that we're here today is I wanted to talk about your handle time." And so obviously the coach missed listening, but more importantly, missed connecting with that human being, missed a trust building opportunity. And that has severe consequences on the ability of our coaches to be effective. But here's the thing, if you're not evaluating your coaches on their coaching effectiveness, then you're certainly not going to know that. But you can see it's happening when agents are coached over and over and over again on the same things with very little change. That, I always say when I'm training, means we're not doing it right, right? So when there's no ROI on the coaching time investment, there's lots of activity and I'm coaching and I'm busy and I'm doing it. But if there's no behavioral change, if there's no performance impact, if there's no engagement impact, it's frustrating for everybody. The agent who's not getting developed, the supervisor who, isn't seeing improvement, and the business who's wondering what's going on because coaching is happening, right? So when we talk about evaluating coaching effectiveness, we have to have ways to see the quantity of coaching that's happening, who's being coached, who's receiving the coaching, what's being coached, and then who is an effective coach. So here's another thought I have about that. If we leave that unaddressed, then whatever is happening, we're saying that it's okay that that keeps happening. Or if there's a thing that's not happening, we're saying it's okay that that's not happening. And that's a message that, believe me, is felt. The energy of that, as well as the physical visibility of that, is seen and felt by everyone. And it's how poor attitudes and poor performance evolve into toxic environments where it's really hard to recover. So having a performance management system and a systemic way to then evaluate the effectivity of the people applying that system is essential, and probably the most essential thing that we can do for both our agents and our frontline leaders. So how do we implement coaching effectiveness? Well, communicating and then modeling right way behaviors is the absolute strongest form of learning. So it's how you project that this is good, it's valuable, and we expect you to do it. And it's how you get the ROI on coaching and the time that's spent on it. So speaking out and modeling the importance is most easily done by, of course, you've communicated the system of how to do it, but then you schedule observations and you observe coaching sessions. It is certainly time intensive, but you will learn things that you probably would not like to learn, but you'll learn those things. But use a coaching assessment when you do coaching evaluations so that you can evaluate everyone fairly across the same criteria that you would hope for them to perform in a coaching session. And that ties back to your system. What model did you ask them to use? What methods did you ask them to use? What behaviors did you ask them to focus on? Obviously, once you observe their coaching, you have to coach the coach, right? And I have a tool, by the way, for when you're observing and coaching the coach. I'm going to share. That's another one of the downloads today at the end. A very simple but highly effective, 20 questions that you can use to evaluate coaching effectiveness, and then coach the coach. And only by knowing what your coaches are doing and coaching them to be better coaches can you supercharge agent performance. So that also involves tracking what you're doing and following through. All of that communicates importance. So again, if you have questions on that fourth element, do share them and we'll address as many as we can in a bit. Okay, so if I recap for you my major challenges and learnings as a contact center person the last really couple decades is we can supercharge performance. We can empower agents to take independent action on their performance if we give them visibility into how they're doing and how it's calculated and where they can see it so that it inspires their own natural drive to take action. We can deliver more informal, social, short, personalized trainings that add so much value to individual skill that has direct consequence then in a positive way on customer experience. Third, you can absolutely provide a coaching and development structure that is standardized and trained and is made consistent throughout your operations. And fourth, you can certainly observe coaching effectiveness and therefore know who's coaching what and how they're coaching, and help them build their coaching competency so that they can help supercharge agent performance. Now, I have done all of this that I'm sharing with you for many years, many years manually. Jim, you
Yes,
threw a
so that was
slide
my
in there
slide.
on me.
That was my slide. I want to remind everybody that so there are a lot of tools and resources that Melissa had mentioned as she was going through talking about those issues and consequences that she needed to overcome and that she helps others to overcome. And so this is these things are going to be included in your bonus kit, and you'll have the opportunity to download those at the end. Also, we're going to be having a Q&A session coming up shortly. So Melissa, you've got about 10, 12 minutes so that we leave room for that Q&A. So please keep going.
All right, very good. Thank you for that. So, right, let me move this slide forward. And those things, by the way, those were a couple decades of learning and experience and refining materials and processes and tools. So I can't even put a value on them for you, but they're based on a lot of consulting and a lot of pain and a lot of growth. So I did all of that manually for very many years, right? And I found an easier way to do it, but initially, because of doing all of this manually, you have to know it's hard to standardize. And it takes a lot of time. It's hard to sustain. It's also almost impossible to scale with uniform consistency. So while you can do it all with the tools, you have to put time into it. But then I found utopia. And what I mean by that is, I guess it was about 2.5 years ago that I met Amplify, and Amplify became my utopia. I got so excited when I first saw it because it is a supercharged performance management platform. And I immediately saw that so much of what I had been doing manually on site for clients, it could be streamlined and elevated with the capabilities of the platform. And when I left the site, it wasn't such a struggle to sustain, right? Because it wasn't just like, hey, somebody had to take over everything I'd been doing. And that's actually why I joined the Amplify team. I was such an advocate as an individual user. It became my career mission too. So very quickly, I'm going to give you just a little overview, and then I'm going to share 4 capabilities that tie to the capabilities that we've all talked about, but doing them manually, and in this case, instead, they are automated. And that's why I said this was my utopia and so exciting. So it's an all-in-one AI-powered performance management platform, and it does all the heavy lifting, right? It integrates all the data, it synthesizes across sites, teams, and agents, it visualizes performance, automates actions, distributes personalized training, provides standardized coaching workflow and tracking, and calculates effectiveness. So do you want to really supercharge performance? I would say that if you do, you can do it manually, but aren't you tired of that? I feel like all of us in the contact center industry have been killing ourselves working manually for decades. And there are now new possibilities. There are ways to do things smarter instead of harder. And I hope that will be your interest. But listen, you have to be open to making positive change. You have to be open to taking action instead of talking about what could be, right? Unless we're talking about possibilities. So that's why I'm saying, let's have a quick look at 4 ways that Amplify radically supercharges the things we've been talking about doing manually, so you can see what else is possible. So the first thing that I'm going to show you is around the data visualizations we were talking earlier about. Give agents access. So first of all, in Amplify, agents see their performance. In fact, everybody sees their performance at different levels. There's color-coded visualizations that show you where to improve in seconds. There's rankings that provide social peer pressure that I enjoy because I think it awakens the competitive spirit. There's integrated scorecards and incentives that drive motivation and the desire to persevere because I can see what's available to me. And there's coaching commitments and history, which keep them on track with what they're supposed to be working on to improve. So visibility within the platform independently inspires action, competition, and motivation. And that is just very exciting for me, just from knowing how many clients still don't have that visibility for their teams. Secondly, personalized microlearnings. So microlearnings, we talked about personalized training. Microlearnings are a specific type of this bite-sized learning. They're short, they're engaging videos. They can be taken in minutes, so they're really easy to consume. They're very single skill specific, so they can be applied to a very next interaction, which means they're easy to apply. We're not talking hours of content, we're talking a thing, like how do you give the impression of conversational flow in how you ask your probing questions, right? Just very specific things. They're personalized, and this is the most important thing we talked about earlier. They are automatically distributed to agents based on what each of them are struggling with. So it is relevant, short, specific, and it's delivered right to their agent dashboard, so it's also super easy to access. It can be based on your own internal best practices, and it's oriented around what is prioritized by the business. Even better, there's a system-generated calculation that measures whether that training content actually helps agents improve or not. It's brilliant. Another personal favorite of mine. So third, I want to show you the data-driven recommendations engine. That's a lot of language, but the bottom line of what this is, and this is probably one of the slickest things in Amplify, is supervisors are given really quick assistance on next best development actions, which basically means the platform automatically identifies for them, based on all their people's performance, what to do, whether it's coach, recognize, or follow up, with who, and on what metrics or behaviors. And it gives them the whole coaching workflow to conduct, track, curate coaching commitments, progress, and history. So talk about a sort of all-in-one that both gives you an assistance and gives you organization, direction, automation. It's pretty exciting. There's no more wasted time digging through tons of data, trying to figure out what to do. Supervisors are able to spend more time with people instead of spending more time with data. And then that leads me into my absolute favorite capability in Amplify, which is around the coaching effectiveness. For the first time, you can actually quantify coaching. You can see from a coaching effectivity score how effective every one of your supervisors are as it relates to coaching. You actually get a percentage score. It can record the coachings so that instead of having to sit and literally observe coaching sessions, you're able to listen to them and essentially QA or observe that coaching auditorily and perhaps less threateningly than sitting there. And then it also provides various coaching dashboards that break down how much is going on, by who, on what, who's receiving it, and it collectively gives you this brilliant insight and again quantifies both coaching activity and effectiveness, and allows you to really inspect the coaching process in a way that I've never seen another tool have this ability or this visibility or this calculation into effectivity. So it's my absolute favorite part. And it does much, much more, but we don't have time for that today. But that alone made work with my clients so much easier and has had some really dramatic results on client operations. And so I have one quick story I want to share with you from an actual client of ours. And this client, her name is Darla. And I met Darla years ago. I was consulting with her site and she was leading operations. And so I taught her, we worked together, I taught her my coaching model and methodologies and gave her all the tools. And we coached together. I observed her and coached her many times. We got in alignment, and then we did a transformational coaching of her entire operations. And at that point in time, she'd been doing everything manually, as we've been talking about. And she talks about that, how to have to dig through data and figure out what to do. And when I left, Darla had to do everything then manually on her own. And there's not often a dedicated resource to do that in a contact center because we usually operate fairly trim. But the good news is we're nearly a decade later and Darla is an Amplify customer. She no longer has to do everything manually. And she's seeing some terrific results that she shared with us around returns on productivity and performance and meeting commitments. And so from her perspective, her insight and ability to affect business operations is so much easier and so much more immediate. And we've had other customers that have similar experience as well, primarily experiencing a lot more time to spend on people than on and development than on data, right? And tangibly boosting engagement and productivity and client results. So
right, you only have like a minute. You got to get moving because we got to get to Q&A.
Hey, I'm going. This is it. Now I'm going to tell you how to learn more. The bottom line is there's a special promotion for attendees and viewers. It is unique for you all. It is not available to the outside public. We're including several consulting components for you around analyzing your current quality forms, coaching forms, and materials. We're including a 6-video microlearning series on customer experience, a discount off of base implementation, and a 60-day money-back guarantee. It's just under $10,000 value that if you close with Amplify within 180 days of viewing this event, those things will be provided to you. So what I want you to do is go to amplify.com, and Amplify is spelled AI at the end, so amplify.com/coach. And all you have to do simply is select whether you want to talk with me or you want to schedule a demo. I'm happy to answer questions or to discuss specific scenarios. And of course, we'd love to show you any more about Amplify. Amplify.com/coach, and just tell us if you want to talk or demo. Jim, that's all I had to share in the brief time we had. We could go on forever, but I'll pass it back to you. Thank you.
Well, there's, I think, one other component is that you're actually guaranteeing the performance and that there's a 60-day money-back guarantee on using Amplify. And that's, there's no other software company out there that's doing anything in the performance management realm that's offering a guarantee like this. So in addition to that benefit of the professional services and the other add-ons and stuff, there's also a guarantee. So, I mean, come on.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we're all personally vested in it, believe in it, have seen what it does, and would love to help other clients.
Good. So I'm going to give you a chance to download the bonus pack here in a second, but I wanted to go over a couple of questions so we had some good ones come in. So Cody asked, how do you balance having real-time reporting versus past reporting and keeping team members engaged in the moment, specifically those who potentially aren't top performers, potentially due to tenure?
Okay, so that was an awesome multi-part question, Cody. I'm going to answer it fairly succinctly, though, and tell you that within a tool such as Amplify that consolidates all of that, performance visualizations are presented real-time, intraday. They're presented week-to-date or month-to-date, and they're also presented in terms of trends months back, years back, however long you have data in Amplify. Once it's integrated, it's presented in all different timelines. So you can look at and manage right now. You can look at and manage this week, this month. You can look at and manage longer self-defined time periods as well.
And Adriana asked, how effective are the shadowing sessions in your experience? And I think she was specifically talking about, you mentioned something about monitoring the coaching sessions, making sure that coaches are coaching like they're supposed to. And she was
absolutely. It is probably the #1 apprehension and objection that I've ever gotten from both supervisors, and agents. But you tell agents that you're there to evaluate the supervisor, and then they're fine. And you tell supervisors that the reason you're there is to honor them, to learn where they can grow, and to give them that candid and genuine input. And if it is a non-threatening, I'm here to support your growth, as opposed to I'm here to see what you're doing wrong, and you have the skill to give them that input on their growth, it's amazing. I've done probably 1,000 coaching sessions in my career with agents, managers, directors, and I've had as many as 6 people in a room doing coach-to-coach observations from one level to the next. It's phenomenal, but it takes a lot of time and it takes skill to be able to deliver valuable feedback.
Thanks for that. Now we have a couple of other questions, and we're gonna see if we can get to those before time runs out. But I wanted to make sure that everybody gets a chance to download the bonus pack that has all these materials in it. I've made that available within your window, your console window within your webinar platform. So hopefully you can pull that down now. If you have any issues with being able to download this file, we'll make it available in the Facebook community as well. And also just send a note to either one of us, and we'll make sure you get this bonus pack. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and shut that off. As I mentioned, we're going to be following up within the Facebook community for additional questions. We're about wrapped up, and I want to give everybody a minute or a chance to get ready for their next top of the hour item, and go ahead and just say thank you, Melissa, for sharing your extensive knowledge and wisdom about improving agent performance in contact centers. This has been valuable information for me. I know I learned a lot, and I'm looking forward to getting into all those bonus pack materials myself.
Jim, thank you so much. And everybody, I wish I could talk with you all personally. Again, if you go out to amplify.com/coach, you can ask to speak with me. We can talk through specific scenarios. You can also ask to see more of Amplify, what's possible in terms of making this easier now than what we've all had to do manually for so long is really pretty exciting, and that's what I'm enjoying. But lovely to be with you all today. Thank you so much.
So thank you for participating in this webinar and spending your time with us today. Hopefully you'll learn a lot. You'll be able to supercharge your agent performance and have everybody in your contact center move onward and upward faster. Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.